Growing up, my mom always taught me the importance of standing up to bullies. And I think that has a huge part to play in why I'm doing what I'm doing now as the real estate agent gone rogue who is teaching homebuyers how to represent themselves without hiring a buyer's agent. And I do this because I have seen time and time again the way that the traditional real estate system is set up to bully buyers, especially, into participation in a system that is stacked against them. And I felt that this week. I was talking with a home buyer that is going unrepresented or a DIY home buyer. And she found a property that she really liked. She called the listing agent to set up a time to tour the property. And the listing agent just flat out said, nope, I don't work with unrepresented buyers. So you're going to have to find a buyer's agent. And I'd be more than happy to refer you to somebody in my office, and then they can schedule the showing. And of course, this lady that I'm talking with was just shocked by it. And sadly, I'm not surprised because I've heard this story time and time again now. But she's just wondering, like, what do I do? And why am I being forced to participate in hiring an agent when I don't want one? Like, is it a legal requirement that I have to have an agent in order to buy a home? And of course, the answer to that is no. Free market allows you to enter in as a self-represented or unrepresented homebuyer. That's a perfectly legitimate, legal way to participate in the market. But unfortunately, too many realtors, brokers, brokerages are trying to stack the deck against homebuyers and bar them from participation. So while it is your legal right, there are some systemic issues here. And that's really what I want to address in this podcast, as well as give you 7 strategies for pushing past a listing agent that does not want to cooperate or work with you as an unrepresented homebuyer. If you're new here, my name is Nick. I am the host of the DIY Homebuyer Podcast that you're listening to. I also have the DIY Homebuyer community on School. It's free for now, but it won't be free forever. So do be sure to join that. If you're enjoying the show at any point, please do 1, subscribe. And then 2, if you're on a platform where you can leave a review. I've had some agents that have listened to my show, and I'll tell you this, they're not excited about what I'm doing or the content that I'm creating. So I've gotten some bad reviews, and I would really love it if you appreciate what I'm up to and resonate with any of the message here. It just goes a long, long ways in terms of discovery and my own personal encouragement if you would leave a review or a comment or just something positive. That would be wonderful, and I would be forever grateful for it. But with no further ado, let's dive into this episode. And I want to start by just talking about what are the 3 forms of representation. We'll be quick here, but I just want to make sure that we've got an understanding of, all right, what are the valid ways to participate as a home buyer? And the most common and traditional way is by hiring your own buyer's agent. And for many people, this is just sort of the default mode. Like, I'm going to buy a home, I'll hire a buyer's agent. And it wasn't a big decision for many people for a long, long, long time, because buyer's agents would use this line of like, well, it's a free service to you. You don't pay me, the seller pays me. And that wasn't exactly true, which of course led to the lawsuits in 2021-ish that finally got settled in 2024, and a bunch of rule changes where now buyer agents are having to discuss compensation with their clients, the home buyers, before actually looking at homes. And this is causing home buyers to wake up to the fact that, wait a second, my buyer's agent is financially incentivized for me to spend more money and as quickly as possible, because they only get paid when I actually close on a home. And the amount they get paid is proportional to how expensive of a home I buy. Why would I want to hire somebody to represent my interests whose financial interests are not alone aligned with my own? That's the misalignment that many home buyers are waking up to and starting to think, well, what are my other options then, rather than give some chump 3% of the purchase price of my home? Surely there's another way. And there are two other ways. Now, the next one is dual agency. And dual agency is a bit of a farce, because dual agency is where you have one agent that is representing both the seller and the buyer. But the problem is that what the seller wants and what the buyer wants are opposed to one another. And so how do you have one person representing two people who have opposing desires? It's like having one chef that's trying to cook a meal for somebody who's a vegan and somebody who's a carnivore. It's like, well, what do you make? It's a next to impossible task. And what it does is it neutralizes that agent, so that really they're just facilitating the transaction. And so I don't recommend anybody participate in a dual agency relationship. A lot of states have already made legal moves to ban dual agency, and they call it something else, like a transaction agent or whatever. But I just stay away from anything where you have one person that is neutralized because they're trying to mediate or represent the interests of two opposed parties. And then the third and final perfectly legitimate way of representing yourself, or of representation, and the one that I advocate for, is, of course, DIY home buying, or on your paperwork, it'll look like you're an unrepresented buyer, which, just side note, speaks to how much agents and the National Association of Realtors have influenced these documents that they call you unrepresented. It's like, no, I am represented. I'm represented by me. And that's enough. So, by being an unrepresented buyer, the thing you've got to recognize is that most of the time you're going to be dealing with sellers through their listing agent. And that listing agent does not work for you. They do not represent you. They do not have your interests at heart. In fact, based upon the terms of their agreement with their seller, they are only and exclusively looking out for the seller's best interests. So you need to be aware of that, but that is actually okay. You don't need to be intimidated by that, because it just means that instead of talking directly to the seller, you're talking to somebody that they have hired to be their voice and be their face. And now you're dealing just directly with that person. Now, what does that listing agent owe you? They should treat you with excellent customer service. And that's not even tongue in cheek. Like, you are about to make a several $100,000, if not $1,000,000+ purchase. Like, they better treat you amazingly on behalf of their client, the person trying to sell their home. You would want that, right? Like, if you're selling anything that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, you would want to make sure that customers receive excellent customer service. So the listing agent should show you that, and they owe you honesty about the condition of the home, about anything that can be known about the home that the seller knows or that they know. They have to disclose those things. So you can ask them anything you want about the condition of the property or the surrounding area. And if they know the answers, they've got to tell you. The thing that they can't do is they can't do anything that would be of a financial detriment to their seller. So if the house is listed at, let's just say, 700,000, but they know that the seller would probably take 675, they can't say, "Hey, I bet you could get it for 675." Or if you don't know what contingencies to include, they can't tell you, "Hey, when you write your offer, make sure that you include an inspection contingency," because that's not in the seller's best interests financially. So if you do ask the listing agent anything about, like, well, how motivated is the seller? They got to be really careful with how they answer that. And if you ask anything about pricing, they might be willing to share some comps or why they've justified the value at where it's at, but they are not going to tell you anything about how to get a discount on the house or give you any strategy for how to write an offer, unless, of course, it's how to get their seller the very most money possible. So you got to be careful about that. But unrepresented buying is a perfectly legitimate form. So assuming now that you are an unrepresented buyer and you have the same experience that my client, who is a DIY home buyer, that she had, and you call a listing agent to say, hey, I'm really interested in this home, would love to set up a time to see it, and they say no. Well, what do you do? And first and foremost here, it really helps, I think, to just understand the listing agent's motivation. And there are a few things that are likely going on. Um, One is there is a bit of a fear. However, I think this gets severely overblown. And the fear is that you, as an unrepresented buyer, don't know what you're doing. You're going to cause problems and headaches. You're going to back out at the last minute, and that you're just going to make their life miserable, and that you're not as serious. So they're worried about that. And coupled with that, they're also worried about liabilities that you're going to create for them because especially if there isn't any legal establishment of dual agency, then they've got to be careful that they're not giving away too much on the seller's side. They've also got to be careful that they're not doing too much that would like imply that they're representing you. And so there are some tricky things professionally that a listing agent is having to navigate when working with you as an unrepresented buyer. So there are some of those fears. And I think you just need to be aware of what those fears are and where they're coming from as a professional. That's going to just help you be in the right frame of mind as you communicate, because then you recognize, all right, I'm needing to assuage some of these fears. And we'll talk about that. There's also a greed element. Let's just be honest about that, because in states where dual agency is allowed, a agent stands to make 2 times as much if they're able to represent both you and the seller, right? Why wouldn't they want to double end that deal and make twice as much for hardly any extra work? So, of course, there's a greed element that is going to have them pushing for dual agency. And even if they don't push for dual agency, then there's a greed element in that. Most listing agents are also buyer agents from time to time, and they want to protect and maintain the status quo. It is better for their business if every seller uses a listing agent and every buyer uses a buyer's agent. They do not want it to become normalized that people go unrepresented. And so there is a long-term incentive for them professionally to make it as hard as possible for unrepresented buyers like yourself to participate in the market. It's unfortunate, but that is a reality that you run into. And I think that that's also good to keep in mind of like, okay, you're trying to overcome two of the strongest human emotions, which are fear and greed, that are driving many listing agents when they say no. They will not work with an unrepresented buyer, or they give you resistance. So, how do we push through the BS and move ahead productively anyway? Well, let me give you these 7 strategies. So, number 1, own the pushback. Don't be surprised by it. Be pleasantly surprised when you find a listing agent who is happy and eager to work with you in service of their client. That hopefully will become more and more the norm moving forward. But at least right now, don't be surprised when a listing agent is not excited to work with you, and just own the pushback and anticipate it and be able to let them know that, like, hey, I'm good. I've got this. I'm happy to represent myself. I have been educated on the process. I'm part of a community where I'm learning how to do all of this. I've taken a course. I'm talking with Nick. He's guiding me through everything, but I'm going at it on my own, and I'm good. And you can let them know too that, like, I have done some of my due diligence here. Like, I am pre-approved. I'm happy to sign a disclosure that acknowledges that you represent the listing agent, or that you represent the seller, and that I am the unrepresented buyer here. Whatever you need, happy to do it. But number one is just owning that pushback up front. Number two, out prepare them. Try and know more about the house and the neighborhood than they do. And this will come up a bit on the phone. Like if they push back as you're trying to schedule it, you can just say, hey, like I've looked around this neighborhood for a long time, and I know that this other house hit the market and it sold within 7 days, and I don't want to miss out on this opportunity. I know that things are hot. Being able to mention certain features about the home that really appeal to you or make it uniquely well suited to you. Anything that you can do to just show that like you have prepared, you are organized, the listing agent is actually going to respect that. Because again, from that fear standpoint, their main concern is that they don't want to waste their time. They don't want to waste the seller's time and ask the sellers to clean up, get out of the house for 30 minutes to an hour for you to tour it. So just by you showing, yep, I'm serious, I'm prepared, the listing agent will respect that. Number three, this is kind of one of my favorite. And of course, you got to make it work for you, but hit them with some swagger. And what I mean by that is that sometimes, and I have this problem myself, is that you come in a little overly polite. And while being polite is good and can get you a long way in life, I actually got out of a speeding ticket for being polite once, which another story for another time. But there's also a place for some swagger and for where you just set the terms of that. It's like, hey, there's a lot of homes that I'm wanting to see. Everything like these other agents that I've talked with or listings that I'm looking at, it's gone great. And but this is one that's high up on my list, and so let's make it happen. And you kind of just keep pushing in a not in an arrogant or rude way, but you just are like, hey, I'm good. I know what I'm doing. Yep, I hear you. That yeah, it's easier. You don't like working with unrepresented buyers, but I'm not like most of the unrepresented buyers that you've worked with. Like I am. I'm educated. I'm competent. I'm confident that I can do this, and I've got the help that I need should I run into any trouble. So when works for you, and you can even mention a couple of little things like, well, with the if I talk to the seller, would they uh, be okay with me touring it? Like, can I just get their contact information and just go around you? And that kind of bleeds into another point that we'll get into. But just swagger being shorthand for confidence. Come into that conversation of setting up your your tour with confidence. Number four, lock down your lips. Don't say too much. Try and keep it short. Try and keep it sweet. Don't say, yeah, I'm approved up to $1.2 million, but, I'm just trying to be conservative. So I'm looking at $700,000 homes here. But, you don't want to give away too much about where you're at financially. Sure, it's fine to share a general pre-approval. It's fine to share proof of funds if you're a cash buyer and the listing agent wants to see that to vet you and verify. All that is okay. But you don't want to give away too much about your financial position. You don't want to give away too much about your timing. Like, I am desperate to get into a house. I need to have this done by the end of the month. That's probably not a helpful thing for you to say, because again, anything that you give the listing agent, they can try and use to the seller's advantage when it comes to negotiations later, should you move forward on the house. Number five, and this is one that I sort of teased, but it's flexing the rules. Or another way of putting it is just knowing your rights and sticking to them. So when a listing agent will try and give you this whole thing like, well, I don't work with unrepresented buyers, and I don't do dual agency, or oftentimes they'll conflate the two of like, you'll say, I'd like to see the house. And they'll say, well, you need an agent because I don't do dual agency. And you try and say like, well, no, I'm unrepresented. No, I don't work with unrepresented buyers. You got to have a buyer's agent. And this is where you can flex both your knowledge of like, oh, like is that in writing somewhere? Like, can you show me where it says that? And they won't be able to. You can have it ready to go on National Association of Realtors' own FAQ. There's, I think it's number 75, 76, 77 on their FAQ form. Uh, Talks about how listing agents do not need to have any sort of agreement with a buyer wanting to see that agent's listings. So a listing agent can always show their listings in service to their seller without needing any sort of agreement. So just knowing that, and not being afraid to say, if they still refuse to give you access to the home, to say, hey, can I get the information for your managing broker? Or can I get the information for the realtor association that you're part of locally here? Because this sounds like you're trying to force me into representation when that's not actually something that's required for me to participate as a home buyer. So what do we do here? And just by putting that back on them, we'll usually have them really rethink, okay, do I want to actually push this when I don't have legs to stand on? And it kind of goes back to that second point as well of like, you've out prepped them, and deep down, they respect that. And finally, not finally, excuse me, we got two more. Number six. So after you flex the rules, number six, I'd just say practice the dance, role play all of this, and you don't even necessarily need a second person. When we do one-on-one coaching, I will often role play with the clients that I'm working with, but you can even just do this by yourself. But of just going through the whole conversation to build up that confidence, to build up that swagger, to overcome that objection, if you will, of the or rejection of the listing agent saying that they won't work with you. But just the more practiced that you come off, the more that you're less shaken by any response that they may have, the better that will go. So do practice that. And number seven is, if they really are refusing to work with you, just be prepared to walk away strong. And what that means is that, like, you don't need to capitulate to them. It Even if it is the perfect home, like in that case, you can find a way to go directly to the seller and let them know, whether that's by sending a letter or finding their number and giving them a call, to just say, hey, do you really not want your agent to show me the home? Here I am. I'm a qualified buyer. Here's what happened with the agent. I promise that will lead to a very serious conversation about whether or not that listing agent will keep that listing. Or you can go to the managing broker of that listing agent, or the association, as I said, like to actually follow through with that flexing the rules piece. If they continue to double down, like, don't be afraid to report that behavior and activity. But yeah, don't be bullied into working with an agent if that's not something that you want to do. So those are the 7 strategies that I would recommend. Once again, just real fast. Be prepared for and own the pushback. Out prep the listing agent. Hit them with some swagger. Number 4, lock down your lips. Don't say too much. Number 5, flex the rules, knowing your rights. Number 6, practice that dance, role play it. And number 7, walk away strong if need be when push comes to shove. But I think if you implement these, you really, like, you won't have problems getting in. And I'll do future episodes where we talk about, all right, well, once you are touring a property, or once you're putting together an offer, like, what does the relationship with the listing agent look like there? And how do you protect yourself in that case, as well as what are reasonable limitations? Like, we don't want to be people that are expecting listing agents to do free work for us. So we want to recognize the limitations of what they're doing in service to their seller, and that the seller is rightfully compensating them to do in treating you like a customer, versus when you're overstepping and asking them to take on responsibilities that you, as an unrepresented buyer, are actually saying, no, I'm willing to take those upon myself, which is why, as an unrepresented buyer, you should also be entitled to the savings of not having a buyer's agent or not having somebody else, a professional, coming in to represent you. But that's more content for another day, another time. Fortunately for you, if you do want more of this, well, we're well over 20 episodes now. So there's a lot of content in this podcast that you can go back and listen to. If you want to go even deeper than that, the DIY homebuyer community on School. That's the place that you need to be. Like I said, it's free right now, but it's only free to the first 50 people that join. Once we've got 50 members in there, that's when I do need to start charging, in part because I got costs. School is not a free platform. And as much as I love y'all, got to keep the lights on and food on the table for my 3 kids somehow too. So it'll be nominal, but all to say, best to just jump in now. And then, of course, if you want to talk about what it looks like for us to work one-on-one together, a little bit different than, it's not true agency, but more of a consultant coach kind of role, empowering you to represent yourself successfully in the home buying process. Well, I invite that conversation as well. Thank you all. If you haven't already, one final reminder: subscribe, review, leave me a friendly comment. I reply to all those, and I'll see you in the next one.